Hi, I am Maya van Rossum. I'm the Delaware Riverkeeper, leader of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, but also founder of the National Green Amendments for the Generations movement. And for those that have been following the movement, you know that the start of Green Amendments for the Generations began in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with an incredible legal victory we had using Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment to challenge a very pro-fracking law. And so it is very appropriate that I am joined here today by Mark Lichty. He is a businessman in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also now a filmmaker, very much focused on fracking, fracked gas issues, environmental issues of all kinds, with a special message looking at the power and importance of Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment, its Green Amendment. So Mark, I wanna thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I want to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and about your own personal story.
I can, but first, Maya, I wanted to thank you personally for your leadership on this issue. In part, it's your leadership that has inspired me to do this most recent film on the Environmental Rights Amendment. I had been concerned that it had not been adequately understood by the citizens of the Commonwealth. And so I said, we need to make a film about this. By the way, I also want to thank you too for having the wisdom to postpone the Facebook Live event in the midst of the George Floyd tragedy. And it's time to grieve and come together. And so hopefully this will be seen at a time when many of those sentiments have been shared and we have better direction with regard to those tragic issues in our society. But coming back to you and your leadership, so what that caused me to do was to begin to talk to people about the Pennsylvania Environmental Rights Amendment, which has been in place since 1971. And I talked to probably 35, maybe 40 people about the amendment. And only 2 people that I spoke with realized that we had a constitutional right in Pennsylvania to clean air and clean water. And since I had done a film, Groundswell Rising, before about the fracking movement, I knew the power of film. And so I decided, well, I have to do a short film on this to, number one, to get people to understand that this is a powerful tool, but also to elevate the consciousness of the legislature, because I'm honestly not sure whether some of the legislature realizes that they have a trusteeship duty to enforce this, as does every public official, whether it's your township supervisor, whether it's your county commissioner, it doesn't matter. They all, once they take the oath of office, have this duty to deploy the Environmental Rights Amendment. And so I felt that it needed a tremendous amount of exposure. And it's because of COVID, we just really we did another edit, we put the final touches on the film, maybe 6 weeks ago, but with the COVID crisis, it's been very difficult to get the film out. But and we need the support of the people that are listening to this. We need folks, if you haven't seen Pennsylvania, a Fractured State, go to Facebook and look at the film. But you asked about my own story, and so cut me off if you have a question, okay? Because I'll go on a little bit here. I don't want the audience just to focus on me, though. But in my own life, I was pro-fracking previously. I had a business. It was a metal fabricating business in East Stroudsburg, and so I listened to all the propaganda from the gas companies, the propaganda that the 500 chemicals that are used in the fracking process were as safe as the chemicals under our sink, even though some were carcinogenic and had many hazardous. I listened to the propaganda that this was necessary for our national security. Of course, as you know, Maya, now we're exporting our national security. We're exporting the gas. So that's a head scratcher. Why are we exporting our national security? But we won't dwell on that. In any event, so I spent, because I bought into that propaganda, I spent over $200,000 converting from oil, one fossil fuel, to gas, another fossil fuel. I think it was around 2006 or so. And it was only after I began to do the research, and only after a very dear friend of mine, Renard Cohen, came to me and said, Mark, you better take a look at this again. And we began Groundswell Rising, did I realize that I'd made a terrible mistake in investing in natural gas. And that's when I flipped, when I did the research. And now when I speak about it, I say, you can't do the research and not come across about 17 or 1800 studies that say that fracking is bad for the health and the environment. And once you do the research, you have to become concerned. And for me, I became anti-fracking and dedicated literally thousands of hours to trying to preserve the Pennsylvania Constitution and limit fracking.
So Mark, Groundswell Rising really had an impact on many people, myself included. And I'm just wondering, having gone through the research and put so much energy and really love into a film like that, trying to correct the record and spread the message about how dangerous fracking is. How did you feel emotionally afterwards when you saw how well received your film was, and the really powerful impact it was having on helping to advance the anti-fracking movement?
Well, first I want to give much credit to Renard Cohen and Matt Cohen. I was not a filmmaker. They were professional filmmakers, and they kind of roped me into this, and I was involved in every step of the way, but they're the ones that had the initial notion. But we were very proud of the film. We tried to make a film that would uplift spirits. We had seen Gasland, Josh Fox's Gasland, and that with the work and the leadership that Josh showed in those films was wonderful. But I was kind of overwhelmed when I saw that, and so hence we said we got to do something that's going to lift spirits, and we feel that we accomplished that. When people walk out of the theater after having seen Gasland, they feel like they can do something. They feel like their voice will make a difference. Now, yes, it's been frustrating for me because it's been nearly 10 years since I've been working on this issue. And it's so self-evident for me that there should be limits and a moratorium or a ban on fracking. And let me just speak to that for just a second. We have the Medical Society of Pennsylvania representing 16,000 physicians that says there should be a moratorium. We have the Auditor General who audited fracking. The DEP audited the DEP's regulation of fracking and said that they were doing a woefully inadequate job of regulating fracking. That's scary when one agency audits another agency and they tell us that it's woefully inadequate. And that was a few years ago, but I don't think that's changed at all. And we have 1,800 studies that indicate that there's issues, health and environmental issues around fracking. I lived in Sweden for a year 50 years ago, and I've been involved in social justice issues since that time. But I haven't felt as unlistened to on any issue in all that time as I do on this issue of fracking. we have such a preponderance of the evidence on this fracking issue that it's baffling that we haven't been heard. And we have states like New York and Maryland that have banned it. Many communities have banned it. Nations have banned it. And Pennsylvania, because we are so the fracking money is flowing so greatly that it's corrupting the system. It's totally corrupting the ability of Pennsylvania, surrounded by two states that have banned it, to be able to see their way.
So, many people think when it comes to the environment that there was one political party that is primarily pro-environment and another political party that is primarily anti-environment. Without naming names, I think we all know what the characterization is. So why do you think that, or do you have a perspective on how and why in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania support for fracking, which is so devastating in terms of the environment and the health and safety of our communities, why is the support for the fracking industry so bipartisan?
Well, I think the fracking industry has developed an unusual strategy of dispensing money. A lot of the fracking funds end up going down to the local level, fire departments, and so there, whatever, lots of different local entities, and so they have been able to bribe the local officials to support fracking. So so it doesn't matter then whether you're Democrat or Republican. Although, yes, I think your characterization of the parties that we won't name is still.
It's okay to name them.
Yeah, and it is true that the Democrats do tend to be more pro-environment than the Republicans, but nevertheless, the Democrats, many of the Democrats, are supporting Governor Wolf. I have a lot of respect for Governor Wolf, but he hasn't stepped up to the plate adequately on the fracking issue.
So, and have you heard at all about Senator Dalen Leach's effort to advance a ban on fracking, and have any sort of thoughts and opinions on that?
Well, I think it's a worthy effort, but I'll tell you what by the way, we mentioned Pennsylvania, fractured state. Let me back up just a minute. I really encourage anybody in the audience, number one, to see the film Pennsylvania, Fractured State, but more importantly, make sure your legislator sees the film. And after your legislator sees the film, then go visit the legislator. And if you're anywhere near Stroudsburg, East Stroudsburg, I'm happy to go with you too, to support that process. Now, I certainly celebrate Dalen Leach's effort to get a ban. Actually, UU Plan, by the way, the Unitarian Church has partially funded this film, and we have an environmental justice team, and I'm on that team, and we looked at this practically, and we said, okay, let's just see if we can get a moratorium on fracking, on fracking infrastructure, future wells. Okay, let the old wells stand, because we thought maybe that was politically viable. And by the way, there'd be about 9,000 old wells, and that's plenty of gas for us. Maybe we couldn't be exporting our national security anymore because we're not drilling new wells, but we'd have plenty of gas for us. But we couldn't. You can't even get legislation on a moratorium introduced in this state. So bless Dalen Leach with a ban. I mean, go for it. It's not going to happen. Not in this state, it won't happen. And that's that's why we need to deploy the Environmental Rights Amendment. We need to use that in every way we possibly can.
And of course, we, my perspective is, well, it might be an uphill battle. We will certainly not achieve success if we don't start, right? And if we don't have a band to surround ourselves around. And when we first used Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment, Article 1, Section 27 in our litigation against Act 13, I got so many calls, people, telling me in one form or another that I was a fool. And yet, of course, that won the day and has had powerful, powerful precedent-setting impact, which is why I love that you're, really embrace the power and importance of it and are using your talents to help advancing that important message. And sort of, so you've kind of answered the question, but just to put an exclamation point or a period on the end of the sentence, as you've said, the oil and gas industry puts a lot of money into their false messaging. So you've talked about, and I think you're spot on, using the power of the films that you have made to inform legislators and then follow up with meetings from constituents. Are there other strategies that you've thought about that people can and should be using to overcome the false messaging from the industry? Maybe with legislators, but also just maybe with friends and neighbors.
Yeah, what's interesting about the whole topic of the false messaging, it's the same thing that we read about in Merchants of Doubt, in which case the cigarette companies were not trying to prove anything. They were just trying to use their marketing dollars to create doubt in the minds of the consumer. So they managed to do that for 60 years and hundreds of thousands of deaths. And so the same advertising firm is a merchant of doubt with the gas companies. They're playing the same game. They're trying to create doubt in the consumer's mind, and they're being pretty successful about creating that doubt about the health and environmental effects of fracking. The best thing that I can offer, let me take a little bit of a different tack here. I would encourage you all who are listening to find venues to show this film. And I'm, again, just about anywhere in Pennsylvania, I'm happy to come and be a part of that. I don't just talk about the film because this film pretty much speaks for itself. It says, use the film. I mean, use the Environmental Rights Amendment, not the film. Use the film too. More importantly, use the Environmental Rights Amendment. And then if what I've done when I've spoken about this, then I sort of will role play and teach people how to feel comfortable with their legislators. For example, let's say we recently saw the House Bill 1100. And so then I would talk about that. And the House Bill 1100 was going to subsidize the gas industry at taxpayers' expense to the tune of $800 million. And the legislators, the Republican-controlled legislators, legislature passed that. And Wolf vetoed it. And they're not going to be able to overcome the veto. But, you know, I don't need to talk about how the fact that countries are banning plastic, communities are banning plastic. So why do we have to subsidize $800 million for more plastic plants? So it was good that Wolf vetoed that. But when I do these presentations, we'll show the film, but then I say, I'll say, go when you talk to your legislature, pick a piece of legislation like House Bill 1100. See how they voted, and it's easy to see how they voted. You can go to Project Vote Smart. You can go to the League of Conservation Voters, whatever. You can find out exactly how they voted. So, you know, I would say, you know, I see that you supported House Bill 1100, basically giving welfare to the gas companies. How does that jive with the Pennsylvania Environmental Rights Amendment? Can you talk to me about that? That's a little confusing to me. Educate me, would you? And by the way, I see that your rating by the League of Conservation Voters, and this is all accessible, is 23%. Um, how does that jive with it? So that's the kind of lobbying training that I want to teach people how to use this amendment. So you and I are on the same page. You're getting people to try to enact the amendment. I want to make sure it's 100% deployed. That's how we can work together. Right now we're probably 20% deployed in Pennsylvania. We got to be 100% deployed in Pennsylvania. That's what I want to do.
So you've used your artistic talents, shall we say, in helping to craft and produce and advance films and filmmaking to put forth the powerful message of Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment about the devastating impacts of fracking and about the importance of protecting the environment generally. I'm wondering if you have, we have a lot of young people out there that are very involved with the arts and want to know, and middle-aged and older people too, right? A lot of people with a lot of artistic talent. I'm just wondering if you have any advice for them about how they could use their artistic talents in a variety of ways to help spread the word and send the message of the importance of, banning fracking, protecting our earth, and exercising our environmental rights.
Well, that's a great question. And by the way, let me give a shout out to Ed Rogers too, who's with the Delaware Riverkeepers. We used a little clip of his in the Pennsylvania, A Fractured State, a really good clip that he had done. So we appreciate the Delaware Riverkeepers for that as well. By the way, let me give a shout out too in terms of art. I actually started a show here in the Pocono Mountains called Earth Speaks, an art show that's dedicated to giving artists a voice about the environment. And that's been going on for 7 years now. And we need more art shows like that. But, in terms of younger people trying to make a statement, it's interesting now that we have these video cameras, these smartphone video cameras. The video camera that caught the lynching, the knee lynching, I call it the knee lynching of George Floyd. It's no different from the rope. It was just a knee. That was just somebody that shot the thing with this. So the more things that people can shoot with their smartphones, you don't need to be a professional photographer. Just shoot this stuff and get it up. If you see something that's bothering you about how a compressor station that's making too much noise, whatever it is, get the stuff up. It's the content. You don't need to go out and buy $2,000 equipment. Use your phone. They make whole movies with phones now. Get it up. Get it up and get it there quickly, because what you shoot, that video of George Floyd, it made all the difference. It just made all the difference. And the people listening here, they can make a difference in that way.
Yeah, and of course, just before that was the video of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, right, by the white racists who apparently, with some level of encouragement from a police officer, as I understand. I mean, all of these horrific events. And then, of course, last night, people, by the way, this is June 2nd that we are talking about this. This is the night after protesters outside of the White House were literally attacked by military police in order to push them back so that Donald Trump could have his photo op at a nearby church. And just reflecting on, the fact that we had peaceful protesters rising up in response to, as you say, the literal lynching by a knee of George Floyd, of course, weeks after the Ahmaud Arbery case, being attacked by police or government-ordered police officials, whether they were military police or otherwise, I think it was a combination of the two, and then of course recently, not just in Pennsylvania, but in states across the nation, there has been legislation proposed to try to criminalize peaceful protests against fracking infrastructure, including pipelines and compressor stations, right? And literally making it criminal for people to rise up to defend their bodies, their environments, their own properties. When we put all of this together, what does it say to you about the moment we're in when it comes to rights of all kinds, the rights to life, to liberty, to speech, to the safety and sanctity of people's homes? What's going through your mind at this juncture with all of this swirling around?
Well, I've never been as concerned for our democracy as I have been now. I mean, it affects me psychologically to see the underpinnings of democracy so eroded. Well, there's more that I probably could say on that, but well, it's never been as hard to be heard. Let me just say that it's never been as hard to be heard, and so even okay. Let me make an analogy between the fracking issue and what happened with George. So right now, the government is literally forcing people to be arrested to stop pipelines, forcing, because they try to write to their legislators, they try to visit their legislators, they're not heard. So then the government forces them to be arrested. The government forces them to be arrested because the avenues are not there to be heard. Fast forward to George Floyd. Is it possible that is all caused by an inability of a government to hear? And I guess I'm suggesting yes. All of this was totally avoidable. The looting was avoidable. The demonstrations were avoidable if the government could begin to listen. It doesn't have that ability at this time. Maybe the wrong people are in government. That's a possibility. We need some changes in government.
Well, and thinking about the government and people being heard and people being able to effectuate change at the ballot box or otherwise, as I understand it, you were a plaintiff in a landmark case pursued by the League of Women Voters, trying to address congressional gerrymandering here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And because of your litigation success, there have been changes in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Can you tell us a little bit about that case, why you got involved, and the difference you think it will make for more appropriate government representation here in the Commonwealth, whether we're talking about environmental rights, speech rights, or the right to life? And I don't mean the right to life in terms of abortion. I mean the right to life of a person staying alive and not being killed because of the color of their skin.
Sure. Well, in that case, I was one of 18 plaintiffs, and I had not realized up until about 7 years ago how dangerous gerrymandering was. Gerrymandering is very subtle. You don't really know how bad it is until you begin to really look at the maps, the gerrymandered maps, and they're just outrageous. So I saw about, 6 years ago that there were 13 Republican legislators and only 5 Democrats, even though there was a slightly more Democratic registration, yet the Republicans had 13 of the congressional seats. And then I realized something's broken here. And then I was asked to be a part of the lawsuit. And so the lawsuit, the League of Women Voters versus the Commonwealth, set aside the existing legislature. The legislature now decides what the districts will, before decided what the congressional districts would look like. Well, in this case, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, declared that map based on the state constitution unconstitutional. The Supreme Court eventually had to redraw the districts, and we now have fair congressional districts in Pennsylvania, and we also have equal representation of Democrats and Republicans in the congressional districts. What a lot of people don't really realize is that the state districts are all still broken. They're all still gerrymandered. And so that's why people need to get aboard on the House and Senate bills that have to do with this, because their districts are all still broken. And you just go to Fair Districts. Let me just, so I don't dwell on it, just go to fairdistrictspa.org and you'll find out all about that. And it needs, we hopefully will, that legislation calls for independent commissions, not the legislators, but independent commissions to select the districts. And that's the way it should be. Only then will we restore government, restore democracy to the state.
So we're coming to the end of our time, but you clearly have been such an important leader when it comes to protecting our environment and to protecting our democracy. And I'm just wondering if you have any final words of wisdom or inspiration to share with people. And I do, before we close, I really do want to encourage people, you know, to go see Groundswell Rising, watch the film Pennsylvania, A Fractured State, share it with your legislators and decision makers and your friends, family, and neighbors, as Mark said, because both of them are not just informational, but inspirational, and will really help you advance meaningful change in our state and in our nation, right? And in our world, because the climate crisis affects us all. So, but are there any final words from you, Mark, to share with, inspire, inform, and encourage our listening audience?
Well, thank you for asking that. And by the way, again, Pennsylvania Fractured State is on Facebook, but Groundswell Rising is on Amazon. So if you're an Amazon member, you can go see that on Amazon. Yeah, in terms of right at this moment after the situation with George, it might not be the best time to ask me for inspiration, but I think I can give some here, because you know I've been involved in enough hopeful things in my life that I see hope, and I've experienced hope. I mean, you know, when we first started marching against the Vietnam War, it really looked bad. And, you know, eventually the nation woke up after a while. I mean, if you look at smoking, that was prevalent on planes not long ago, and the culture changed on that. I personally was involved here in stopping an incinerator in Monroe County 30 years ago. And I went to a meeting where the borough council member said, Mark, you're wasting your time. The incinerator's a done deal. We stopped that incinerator. We stopped the thing. And you've had your own experiences. I mean, with it's, you know, waking up the Delaware River Basin Commission. So there's hope out there. You got to scratch around to find it sometimes.
We can scratch around and find it in your great films.
Thank you.
With that, I just want to thank you so much, Mark, for joining us and for your leadership and for everything you do to protect our present and future Earth and present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming from you, that's very meaningful. I appreciate that.